Hello dear learner, I welcome you to the lecture 2 of week 11, and the topic of today's lecture is a continuation of lecture 1 of week 11, which is the critique of theory and practice of caste. Now, in this lecture, we will cover first the meaning of Hindu identity of India, then critique of Hindu identity of India from the Dalit perspective, then the reformist and the secularist position on caste, Buddhist vision, then Bhakti tradition, and we will study the political ideas of Jyotirao Phule on caste. Now let us first understand what we mean by the Hindu identity of India. Now the Dalit critique of the theory and practice of caste can be traced to the general identification of Hinduism with the tradition of India or Hindu with Bharatiya. Now, this identification of India with Hinduism is associated not only with the proponents of militant Hinduism but also those who have been the reformers of Hinduism and also the secularism. Now, it is a well-known fact that there has been a practice amongst the various scholars in India to associate the Indian tradition primarily with the predominant Hindu tradition or Hinduism. And this tendency we find not only amongst the social reformers or the reformers who want to reform the Hindu religion, but also we find this type of a tendency even amongst those who are the proponents of secularism. Even though they are asking for distancing of the state from the various religions, still they are not questioning or they are not rejecting the Hindu identity of India. Now, Dalit scholars have provided an alternative interpretation to Indian identity. As we have already explained in our first lecture, that this critique of the theory and practice of caste will be primarily done from the Dalit narratives. That is how Dalits or untouchables or the Shudras or those who are at the lowest rung of the ladder, how they view the institution of caste and the various oppressive practices which have been associated with caste. And this they have done first of all by challenging the identification of Indian identity with Hinduism. Because it is believed that the notion of caste system or the practice of caste system can be traced to the various epics and various scriptures of Hinduism. So therefore they have provided an alternative interpretation to Indian identity drawn on lower caste, Dalits and non-Brahmins, even peasants and women. Now you can see that they are drawing from a larger segment of the society, those who do not belong to the mainstream understanding of caste or those who do not belong to the mainstream discourse or narrative. And these have been generally those who belong to the poor or the lowest rung of the ladder in the society, or those who have been marginalized because of either gender or because of some other discrimination, even on the basis of religion. So they have included within its fold not only the people belonging to lower caste and also non-Brahmins and even peasants and women and also sometimes farmers. The Dalit perspective have drawn on leaders such as Jyotirao Phule, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and Periyar. Now we will see in the subsequent lectures the contribution made by these leaders, activists and social reformers towards building a critique or a theory of the critique of the practice of caste. The alternative perspective has inspired heroes of revolt such as Birsa Munda and Veer Narayan Singh. Now, various revolts have taken place, various reform movements have taken place, and this alternative perspective have provided an inspiration to them. They have been influenced by tradition of Buddha, Mahavir, then Kabir, then Guru Nanak and Basavappa. So, we have to understand this perspective by actually going back to the history and studying and analyzing how the Buddhist perspective on caste have influenced them. And for that matter, what has been the views of Mahavir, Kabir, Guru Nanak and Vasavappa on the issues of caste and caste-based practices. Now, what is the cornerstone of this narrative or alternative narrative? They advocate, first of all, a non-Hindu identity and consider Hinduism as an oppressive force. Now, this is in complete contradiction to the mainstream discourse which constitute Hinduism as the main tradition or the mainstream tradition or which constitute the important element of Indian tradition. Rather than considering Hinduism as a force of liberation or emancipatory, they consider it as an oppressive force. The challenge to the hegemony and validity of Hinduism provides a broader perspective to understand the criticism of caste system. So, if we want to understand the type of critiques or the counter narratives which has been posed against the caste system in India, then we have to understand in the wider perspective of how India has been portrayed or how India has been identified, or in other words, how or what is the identity of India which has been actually portrayed or understood in the mainstream discourse. Now, if you want to study or understand the caste system in India, we know that it has originated in the form of four Varna system, which was in the original sense of the term based on the type of profession or the type of abilities you have to perform certain work or vocation. And it was divided into fourfold. We have already studied it in our lecture 1. Now, this fourfold or fourfold division of society or Varnashram Dharma, it later got crystallized into the fourfold structure of caste in our society. And this caste system, it is important to understand, was associated with the rise of Brahminic Hinduism. So, it is one variant of Hinduism, and that variant of Hinduism provided the basis and justification for caste system. Now, this Brahminic Hinduism was based on the authority of the Vedas and the Brahmins. So, certain attributes are essential to understand what we mean by Brahmanism or what we mean by the Brahminic Hinduism. It was based on the authority of Vedas. It believed in the golden period of Vedas, and it believed that Vedas provided the source or the essence of Hinduism or Hindu civilization, from which all other aspects of their philosophy or social and political life, they draw their inspiration and they have their roots in the Vedas. And the second important aspect of this Brahminic Hinduism is the importance of Brahmins or the authority of Brahmins. So, therefore, this was a particular type of social structure or system which was dominated by Brahmins or which was sanctioned by them, which constituted the authority or supremacy of Brahmins. Now, the Hindu reformist and secular tradition was represented by two important leaders, though there were others also. But here we are mentioning only the name of these two important leaders. One is Mahatma Gandhi, who represented the Hindu reformist tradition, and Jawaharlal Nehru, who represented the secular tradition. Now, in the beginning of the lecture, I have mentioned that this identification of Indian civilization with Hindu tradition or with Hinduism has been the mainstream discourse, and it has dominated the thinking of almost all the mainstream political theorists or mainstream leaders across India. And this prevalence of identity or the idea of identity of India with Hinduism has been in existence not only amongst those who wanted to reform Hinduism, who were against the caste system, who believed that there were many ills which had infected the Hindu or the Hindu system. They also believed that this was one of the predominant tradition of India or the mainstream tradition of India. Even the secularists who believed in separation of religion from the state, who believed that state should maintain a distance from the religion, even they have not denounced religion, though they have made a criticism of caste. But we will see that this analysis of association of religion with caste system was also absent in the advocates of the secular ideas. Now, if we take the example of Mahatma Gandhi did not associate religion with caste. He did not make an analysis or interpretation of the caste system from a religious perspective. Nor did he condemn the Varna Vyavastha, which was the foundation of the caste system. In fact, if we read Gandhi, we will find that Gandhi believed that Varna Vyavastha was essential for maintaining social integration and harmony in the society, because it was based on the division of labor. And it helped in maintaining a sort of harmony in the society. So therefore, he said that the caste system has no connection with the Varna system, because caste system is based on birth, whereas Varna system is based on profession. And he never considered that the caste system which is present in the evil form today had any connection with the Varna system. He made a separation between that. And therefore, he did not condemn the Varna Vyavastha, from which we can trace the origin of caste system. Now, Nehru, though adopted a secular vision, he also did not challenge the Hindu identity. Now, it was very surprising. He talked about the importance of science and technology. He talked about making India a modern state. And he has also discussed about the caste system in India. But he has basically focused on the functional and integrative aspect of caste system rather than its exploitative practices. And he was not so much worried or so much concerned about the various type of practices which were associated with the caste system in India. He was more focused on the functional aspect of the caste system or on the integrative aspect of the caste system in India. So therefore, he also did not, in a way, he did not challenge this Hindu identity and the roots of the caste system, which is actually rooted in Hinduism, in spite of the fact that he adopted a secular vision. Now, as I have said in the beginning of the lecture, that if we have to understand the various Dalit perspective on the theory or the critique of the theory and practice of caste, then we have to go back to the Buddhist tradition. Because it was during the Buddhist period that a very vehement criticism of caste system actually took place. Buddha denounced all forms of caste hierarchies in the society and talked about the equality of human beings. So, therefore, we can see that all the Buddhist scholars have provided a critique of caste and contested the social order based on Brahmanism. So, this is more important because they have denounced all form of idol worship. They have denounced all forms of ritualism, which were an integral part of the Brahminical order. So they have denounced everything which was associated with the Brahminical order or Brahmanism, and therefore the caste system which was based on the Brahminical sanction. And more importantly, they provided various significant roles to untouchables in the social system. For example, they have assigned very important role to Chandals, which is considered to be one of the lowest caste group in Indian caste system. Buddhists propagated the message Bahujan Sukhai and Bahujan Hitai, which means that it is wishing for the well-being of all. So when we are talking about Bahujan, they are talking about each and every member of the society, starting from the highest to the lowest people who are placed at different position in the society. Now, based on caste system and Hinduism, we have to understand that there evolved almost in the 12th century a socio-economic structure which is known as the Jajmani system that evolved and provided the backbone of rural economy and social order. Under this system, the families in a rural village were tied together with each other according to certain practices and customs. And here, the Jajmani system was designed to provide all type of services to the upper class and economic security to the lower ones. So you can see that it was a system of dependence of the lower caste on the higher caste, and it in a way also provided multifarious services to the upper class. So both the classes were tied together in a relationship of dependence, in a relationship of which was marked by dominance, and also it was marked by a type of subjugation. Now this economic arrangement, which was also based on barter economy, provided an economic base or economic strengthening to the institution of caste system in India. Now, after the Buddhist tradition, if we look at the Bhakti tradition, then various movements started from 12th century onwards, and out of that, the importance of the Lingayat movement is very important to understand the significance of the various Bhakti tradition leaders in understanding and in also the ways in which they have criticized the caste system. Now, if we take the Lingayat movement first, it was founded by Vasavanna in northern Karnataka. He rejected various aspects of Brahmanism, including the thread ceremony, rituals, idol worship, etc. So you can see that one common point is running across all these traditions, and it is raising questions and criticizing the Brahminical system of not only caste but also various Brahminical rituals and practices, norms, and also various types of traditions. Vasavanna rejected caste and various other distinctions in the society. Similarly, two very important and prominent names in the northern India were Kabir and Ravidas, who questioned caste and criticized ritualism in multifarious dimensions. If we take the example of Ravidas, who had provided the vision of an ideal world, which is free from all the sorrows which are associated with the practice of oppression and domination. And his very famous poem, which is titled Begumpura, which means a city without sorrow. But one of the weaknesses of the Bhakti tradition was that they did not make an analysis of the Brahminical Hinduism, which it rejected. So here we find a very important difference between the earlier tradition or the later tradition vis-a-vis the Bhakti tradition, because they were more devoted to the Bhakti of Lord rather than analyzing, making a political analysis of the caste system. Though they have rejected all the precepts and norms of the Brahminical tradition, but they have not provided an integrated analysis of the reasons, or neither they have provided any counter narratives to the Brahminical Hinduism. But you know that these traditions have inspired the later thinkers and activists and leaders who have rebelled against the caste system, and they have started various movements against it. One of the important names which is associated with the movements against caste and also who have been a very important social reformer in terms of raising voices against the caste-based oppression, in terms of raising awareness amongst the Dalits, and also played an important role in fostering education for women and children. His name was Jyoti Rao Phule. He was an Indian social reformer, writer, and champion of equality for all people, including poor laborers and women. He was a strong critic of Hindu caste system and deplored the discrimination faced by Shudras. He considered the caste-based discrimination and oppression as vicious and brutal, just like the enslavement of Africans in the United States. Just to see how he is drawing parallels between the caste system and with the enslavement of the Africans as slaves in America. And he is trying to draw parallels by suggesting that the nature of discrimination and oppression is same. He founded the Satya Shodhak Samaj in 1875 that aimed at instilling the sense of rationality amongst the non-Brahmins, and it was also aimed at educating the Shudras. So this organization was very important because the meaning of this organization was to find out truth or to arrive at truth. And therefore, he wanted the people who belong to the marginalized community, especially the Shudras, to know the truth and to develop the sense of rationality, because only with the sense of rationality we can arrive at the truth. And he believed that only by means of education can the Shudras or the Dalits, they can become aware of their rights. They can develop the sense of self-esteem only when they receive education, because after receiving education, they will be empowered. Phule made a very important contribution by inverting the traditional Aryan theory. And he criticized Brahmanism and developed alternative mythology. Now here, in this respect, the contribution of Phule is very, very important. Because till now we have seen that there were many scholars who have raised their voice, who has made a critique of the Brahminic ideology, but they have not provided a counter narrative or provide an alternative ideology or alternative mythology. And Phule has actually provided it based on the traditionally accepted Aryan invasion theory. Now, the prevalent theory of Aryan invasion was interpreted and used by the Brahmins to talk of an Aryan golden age during the Vedic period. Now you will see that how the theories have been interpreted, reinterpreted by various scholars, whether belonging to the mainstream tradition or belonging to the Dalit tradition. And they have used it to justify their own standpoint and vision. Brahmins have used the traditional Aryan invasion theory to justify the golden age, that is the Aryan golden age, because they have considered the Aryan invasion as a golden period which led to the establishment of a golden age in India. And that was during the Vedic period. Now, this was refuted by Phule, because if you remember the function of critical tradition, the function is to analyze, then to criticize, and then to develop those norms and narratives which can be used to counter that practice. So, Phule also followed this method. He refuted this entire theory by arguing that the golden period predated the Aryan invasion when the local inhabitants ruled the country. So instead of agreeing with the Brahmins that the Aryan invasion led to the establishment of the golden period, Phule said that golden period predated the Aryan invasion when the local inhabitants ruled the country. Brahmins used laws, mythology, and caste system to exercise their power and dominance. Hence, he developed a counter ideology or mythology that the different incarnations of Vishnu actually represented different phases of Aryan assault. For example, he quoted the instance of Bali Raja, who was a Kshatriya king and ruled over Maharashtra. His kingdom was casteless and marked by prosperity. So Phule wanted to emphasize that the period before the invasion of Aryans was a society which was casteless in nature, which was highly prosperous. People were very happy and contented in that society. And Bali was the king or the Kshatriya king who ruled over Maharashtra. Then there is a story or a mythology that the Brahmin boy Vaman asked 3 boons of Bali and then stepped on his chest to send him down to hell. Now, this was considered by Phule as an act of deceit and conquest by invading Aryans. So, Phule argued that the defeated Kshatriyas were labeled as Sudras and they were called Sudra after they were defeated by the Aryans. Hence, Phule provided an alternative narrative that was anti-Vedic, anti-Aryan, and anti-caste in nature. Phule's ideas have inspired various anti-caste movements, farmer, women, and environmental movements across the country. So, with this, I come to the end of this lecture. In the next lecture, we will continue with the political ideas of Jyotirao Phule. And now, there is a couple of questions which are based on the topics which have been covered in the lecture, like what do you understand by non-Hindu identity of India? What are the differences between the reformist and the secularist over caste? Explain how the Bhakti traditions have rejected caste. Who was Jyotirao Phule, and name the organization founded by him. With this, I come to the end of this lecture. Hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you very much.